I didn't leave church because I hated God. I left because I checked the receipts. And when I measured the outcomes, the math didn't match the miracles. Prayer looked powerful on stage, but not in people's lives. Testimonies felt trustworthy, but they weren't. And even worse, good principles kept getting warped by bad theology. I still love community. That's why I'm building it without gods. Evidence first, human dignity at the center. The truth is, I loved church. I loved being a pastor. For years, I bought the story that pastors are the backbone of the neighborhood, the ones who hold the center when life starts spinning. And to be real, sometimes we did. We showed up, we prayed, we provided hope, and often tangible support. But college gave me permission to think again. I learned what suspension of disbelief really is, and I realized I'd been suspending mine every Sunday. The cracks started as cognitive dissonance, what we said from the pulpit on Sundays versus what I saw in people's lives on Mondays. But then I picked up on a different lens as I crossed over into my major, sociology. Instead of asking, is God doing this? I started asking, what is this doing to us? And that question, backed by evidence, answered what theology only performed. It showed me why humans create gods, how belief shapes behavior, and how altruism doesn't need a skyhook to be real. That's when I had to face it. A lot of our solutions in the church were performative. Prayer that looked powerful on stage but didn't move the needle in outcomes. Testimonies that sounded like proof but behaved like propaganda. Good principles, community, care, accountability kept getting overridden by bad theology, especially the lie of inherent depravity. I didn't leave because I stopped loving people. I left because I wanted to actually help them. So I left the pulpit, the power, and the politics, and have spent the past decade of my life figuring out what the parts of the church that I love so much could look like without gods, keeping the community, losing the superstition, and centering evidence and human dignity. Today, I want to introduce you to what led me here. If you're interested in this story in full, check out my newest book, Black Nonbeliever Next Door, which is available on Amazon and Windows Shop. College gave me permission to think again, and that was a breath of fresh air. College didn't deconvert me, it denumbed me. I walked in with certainty and walked out with curiosity. I traded amen for show me. Up to then, I was great at suspension of disbelief. Same way you watch a Marvel movie and don't ask about the physics. I did that with testimonies. If it felt good and got applause, I let it slide. But life kept interrupting the script. That's cognitive dissonance at work. When what I believed didn't match what I saw. We said prayer heals, but folks still needed insulin and rent. We said salvation fixes you, but Tuesday keeps being Tuesday. So I tried a new lens, sociology. Instead of asking, is this miracle true? I asked, what does this belief do to people and communities? That one pivot changed everything. Sociology started answering the questions that theology only performed on stage and pretended in real life, such as, who is God? This is often a concept people use to name ultimate values, community ideals wearing a crown, or where did gods come from? I now understand that they come from human pattern hungry brains and group survival. We see agency in the noise, tell stories, and those stories organize us. Questions like, why do humans believe? Because belief bonds tribes, reduces uncertainty, motivates cooperation, and leaders can harness that for good or for control. Turns out a lot of what I called mystery was just humanity in a robe. That led me to what Auguste Comte called the religion of humanity. Not a church with a new hymn book, just an honesty that the sacred things we crave, Care, courage, meaning, and accountability are human work. No gods needed. Altruism is real without the skyhook. Empathy, reciprocity, and shared stakes make people show up for each other. When we design for outcomes, food, housing, mental health, safety, people get better. Not because heaven blinked, but because humans built something that works. Once that clicked, I had to test the things I preached. Were our solutions performing or were they working? Did prayer, salvation language, and testimony culture move the needle or just move emotions? That's where the receipts got uncomfortable. At the end of the day, church solutions were performative. Here's the part that stung the most. A lot of what we called solutions were performances. Sincere, yes. Effective, not like we claimed. Prayer was our Swiss Army knife. Healing, jobs, rent, relationships, baby, let's pray. And sometimes life did get better. But when I started keeping mental receipts, I noticed a pattern. The wins were loud and memorable, but the misses were quiet and blamed on mystery. That's not a power, that's selection bias. If prayer is a method, we should be able to test it. Replicable, scalable, and better than what we'd get from ordinary human care. Otherwise, it's comfort, not a cure. We said God made a way when actually a cousin picked up a shift and a neighbor covered childcare. That's not magic, that's community. And it's about time that we learn how to give humans their credit. We also sold salvation like a product, new creation, chains broken. And don't get me wrong, commitment can absolutely change a life, but we confused euphoria and belonging with transformation. The cycle went like this: you have an altar high that leads to a honeymoon phase that leads to a Tuesday crash. Then you feel guilt that leads you right back to the altar again. That's not freedom, my friend. That's a loop. Real change shows up in baseline behavior and durable skills, how you manage conflict, money, health, even your time, not just how hard you cried at the altar. There's also an overinflation problem. Here's the uncomfortable truth: we overinflated our wins so we didn't have to face what wasn't working. We called coincidence confirmation. We called placebo proof. We put spiritual language on ordinary human effort and then pretended that heaven did it. Now, this isn't an attack on sincere people, it's an audit of methods. If a practice works, it should work beyond the room, in data, in durability, in people's Tuesdays. So, how do we drop the performative while keeping the good? Well, you start with replacing prayer with plans and people, intention plus action plus a reachable care network. You replace salvation with support plus skills and structure. Motivation is the spark, but it's systems that keeps the light on. Let's replace testimony with tracking. Stories are absolutely beautiful, but let's pair them with measurements. When I stopped grading the service and started grading the outcomes, I had to admit a lot of our proof came from testimony culture, powerful stories that didn't match the larger reality. The next big thing for me was realizing that saving people wasn't actually saving people. We said we were saving people, but when I zoomed out from the altar to the aftermath, I didn't see people saved. I saw people stirred, and there's a difference. Salvation language gave us a certificate on day one, but the test is day 100. Safer choices, stable income, healthier relationships, better coping. If those baselines don't move, we didn't save them, we hyped them. And when it didn't work, we'd say they didn't really get it. That's not data. That's a no lose doctrine. Testimonial propaganda was not reflective of reality. Our proof was testimony, powerful stories, tears, music, and a beautiful glimmer of hope. I love stories, but we turned them into propaganda. when we treated the exception like the rule. We showcased the outliers, not the average. We celebrated the spike, not the sustain. We ignored base rates, what would have happened with ordinary support, therapy, meds, a budgeting help, a stable job. Even a true story can still be unrepresentative. That's why grown folk track outcomes. Tell the story, then ask, does this scale? Does it last? Does it beat the baseline? Also, let's be fair. A lot of miracles had names. Auntie Brenda, a union rep, a social worker, a second job, a friend with a spare room, a church that you don't even go to. That's human altruism doing what it does. No matter how hard I wanted to stay in the church, I couldn't overlook this next one. Good principles were overwritten by bad theology. We had good principles, wonderful principles, care, accountability, community, humility. But bad theology kept overriding them like a virus. Care became prayer fixes it, which then delays treatment and practical help. Accountability became submit to authority, which then shields abusers and silences victims. Community became us versus the world, which cultivates isolation and suspicion of outside resources. Humility became absolute and total depravity. This creates permanent moral injury, shame, as identity. This creates permanent moral injury and cultivates shame as identity. Stewardship becomes seed faith and prosperity, which leads to financial exploitation and magical thinking. Justice becomes suffer now, heaven later, no cross, no crown, which breeds passivity in the face of fixable harm. Strip out the superstition and the principles work. Care becomes care plans. Accountability becomes transparent processes. Community becomes mutual aid and trained support. Humility becomes teachability, not self hate. Stewardship becomes budgets and fair wages. Justice becomes action now, not later. So, no, I didn't stop believing in people. I stopped pretending that language was a method. If we want transformation, we need mechanisms, support, skills, structure, and safeguards. And once you see how doctrine can overwrite good principles, you have to confront the source code. Ideas like inherent depravity. That messaging doesn't just miss the mark, it injures the person, which led me to the final act of my deconversion. I wanted to build something better. I didn't leave to burn a bridge. I left to build a better one. For 10 years, I carried a notebook and a question. What would church look like without God's? With all the love, the rhythm, and the room to breathe that made us show up in the first place. I've been a planter, a pastor, and a preacher. I know the music, the moments, the way a room leans forward when hope walks in. I didn't want to let go of that. I wanted to aim it. So imagine this. We open the doors, no altar call, just bridges to better. No pressure cell, just people arriving from real life. Rent due, heart heavy, kids sick, job on thin ice. We take a breath together and tell an honest story, not a miracle report, honest story. What happened, what it cost, what we learned. Then we practice something we can actually carry into Tuesday. How to have a hard conversation without blowing up the room. How to make a budget that doesn't lie to you. How to grieve without disappearing. Not theory, not I'll pray for you. We put it in our hands and try it right there, together, awkward and brave. In the back, there's a little table that used to be where we sold DVDs. Now it's the care desk. You need therapy? We got you. a voucher list, and a real human who will call you back. Need a ride to court? We got you. Somebody's keys just went up in the air. Groceries? We're not waiting on heaven. Tanya's running the list. Marcus has a trunk, and we're filling a pantry today. We still do ceremony because beginnings and endings matter. We welcome a new baby with promises of actual support, not just pictures and memories. We sit with grief and map out 90 days of meals and check-ins. So I'm praying for you becomes I'm on your porch Wednesday at 6. We even do repairs. When somebody breaks trust, we don't hide it under worship songs. We face it, name it, make it right, and build the kind of boundaries that keep people safe to come back. And the mic, it moves. This isn't a guru show. Different voices, different gifts. The person up front isn't a gatekeeper to a God. They're a neighbor with a skill. We tell the truth about money. We tell the truth when we mess up. The book's open. The apology's public. The power shared. How do we know it's working? Because Tuesdays change. The panic attack that used to take you out for a day now lets you breathe in 10 minutes because you learned a tool and texted your person. The eviction notice turns into a payment plan because somebody in the room knew the law. The kid who kept getting suspended now has a mentor who answers the phone. And we stop calling that a move of God and start calling it what it is: us moving for each other. That's the bridge I wanted. Keep the choir, make the lyrics honest. Keep the hug, add the plan. Keep the awe, aim it at the courage it takes to change a life when nobody's promising you a miracle. If that sounds like a place you've been looking for, pull up, tap in. We're building it week by week, person by person, online every Sunday at noon. And if you're in Southern California and you want to help us make this the first campus, musicians, organizers, care workers, designers, hit the link in the description. Don't wait for a sign from the sky. Be the sign. Let's build the bridge. Thank you for joining me for this conversation today. Until next time, keep rising.